Hey there, Jim Johnson for Accent Help here, and I want to talk about the north or the force lexical set, and I'll also bring up a subset within that. Now, it's already a little bit weird that it's actually got sort of two lexical sets assigned to what is commonly this same sound. So when I say lexical sets, I'm talking about J.C. Wells' Accents of English, Volume 1. He goes through all these different lexical set words, right? And I utilize those in a lot of my teaching, and that's very common for a lot of theater, speech, voice sort of teachers like me. So this is what is commonly used for both north and force. And in almost all accents, north and force are the same sound. There are two accents that are popping into my head right offhand that very much so can create a split between those. Scotland. Scotland, very commonly you have a different pronunciation, a more open vowel for something like north, but force gets a little bit more rounded. This is where you can get the horse split or merger. So that's a horse without a voice would be a horse, a horse. So this would be the force lexical set, and this would be the north lexical set. I can't tell the difference between those because I don't make that distinction in my own speech. It's a real challenge to make that distinction, or for me to recognize that distinction. Oh, I didn't finish. Another accent where this very commonly happens, that there's this horse split, is English speakers in India. There also is very much a tendency towards this. It can carry over to Pakistan as well, and other countries right around that region, primarily focused in India. So those are the two big accents that actually create, but keep a distinction between north and force, whereas most accents bring them together to a single sound. Now, sometimes people, so I'm going to let the horse merger go for the moment, all right? Some people also transcribe this one as this. And it may be helpful for you to go back and look at some of my Hell's Corner stuff about the father lot, cloth, thought variations, because most Americans don't round the thought and cloth very much. New Yorkers do, thought, cloth. Most Americans open them more, thought, cloth. So they're not that they're not that different from father, lot, cloth. There's a slight difference for many American speakers. What I would say is generican, that there is a distinction, but the distinction's not very huge. But huge parts of America make no distinction in those. So just be aware of that. They actually say all four of those the same. Really commonly, you might think of this as like Minnesota, right? Father, lot, cloth, thought, that kind of thing. I'm from Iowa, so I'm required to make a Minnesota joke every so often. But the good news for me is I don't need to make a Minnesota joke because Minnesota already is a joke. You're welcome, Minnesota. I look forward to your comments below. So sometimes people write it with this because it's a more rounded vowel. It's a tighter circle, and it very much is this closer thing. It's much more like that New York cloth, thought, or horse, force, north. So arguably maybe it should be this. But what you'll see in most sources is this. Now, if you really want to point it out, you could use the thing that I was using on the last one about start and adding some additional lip rounding. So that's certainly an option for you if you want to dive into the details, if you find that helpful. This is another one where in many non-rhotic accents, the R completely drops away. So as I mentioned, near, square, it's very common for you to just lose the rhoticity. So it becomes near, square. But then with start and north and force, it very commonly becomes start, north, force, where you don't get north, north, north. That's very common, especially, say, with RP, but it'll carry over to many other accents of England and some accents in the US. These are the two where the R completely drops away when that does happen. Okay, so as if I haven't made this all complicated enough thus far, still on the north fourth lexical set, I want to mention a subset of this that I like to teach within this, which is the word, I use the word moral, which I say the same, north, force, moral. Now, moral is within the north lexical set, right? But there are some other words within that north lexical set that also lean towards becoming something more like this turned script A. And this would be the more, think of RP, lot, claw, moral, moral. And it's not uncommon for people to put a syllable break between them, moral. Again, you will primarily hear this in the Northeast, like getting up towards, say, New York and Boston and up into Maine and that kind of thing, where you will hear people say moral, horrible, Florida. And you'll hear it in Florida because there are so many New Yorkers down in Florida. But Florida oranges, these horrible Florida oranges, right? That would be that. I say these horrible Florida oranges. So if I'm selling my body for sex, but I'm not very good at it, and that's actually been my track record up to this point. But anyway, I would be a horrible whore. I would be a horrible whore. But some people would say that I'm a horrible whore. And you know what? I think everyone's right. I am a horrible whore, and I am also a horrible whore. But a horrible whore sounds like a whore who could be whored. Sorry, I'll have to put a warning on this one. Warning! You are degrading yourself if you listen to Jim speak any further. Right? So, I like to think of this in addition to north and force, the subset of moral that may be moral. And in fact, for some people to get that, they almost have to think towards the ah of father, moral. Because, as I mentioned before, there's a tendency for Americans when they say R to round this a little bit, so it starts to become very similar to this. R, start, horrible, horrible, moral. Really, really similar. Yeah? So it almost moves those words like horrible, horror, moral. I call this the moral subset, right? It almost moves those into the start set. Woohoo! Great. Now, I'll talk later about another word that utilizes this, but that's when we get into our next subset. If you'd like to be further confused and overwhelmed by phonetics and by the concept of generic and accents, you can see my generic and materials on accenthelp.com, or you can dig into over 50 different sets of accent materials for actors. Thanks a lot.